Lucky Luciano. Look closely at the face of Lucky Luciano. You'll notice a drooping right eye, a permanent scar from the night he was supposed to die. The mystery isn't just how he survived a kidnapping and a throat-slitting, it's why his enemies let him live long enough to betray them. Was it luck? Or was Luciano the ultimate puppet master, playing both sides of a mafia war like a game of chess? Today we go inside the mind of the man who murdered the old guard to create the modern mob. The country that wanted a drink. America did not fall into crime. It thirsted into it. When Prohibition arrived, it did not erase alcohol. It transformed it into something more powerful than law, demand. Cities pulsed with secret bars, hidden distilleries, and whispered transactions. Organized crime was no longer about survival. It was about opportunity. And in the shadows of this new economy, a new generation was learning that Prohibition was not a restriction. It was an invitation. Two bosses. One city. New York became a chessboard drawn in blood. On one side stood Giuseppe Masseria, known simply as Joe the Boss, a man who survived bullets like rain and believed fear was the only currency worth collecting. Across the board stood Salvatore Maranzano, calculated, educated, obsessed with Roman empires and ancient conquest. Both believed they were destined to rule the American Mafia. Neither knew a third player was already studying them. The boy called Lucania. Salvatore Lucania arrived in America as a child immigrant from Sicily. By 10, he understood something school could never teach him. Protection was just another word for taxation. On the streets of the Lower East Side, he learned how power really worked. Violence was not chaos. Violence was negotiation. And during one attempted extortion, he met the boy who would change everything, Meyer Lansky. The boy who refused to pay but offered partnership instead. The extortion that became a friendship. Lucania and Lansky were opposites. Italian street brutality met Jewish financial brilliance. Together they discovered crime could become organized, not emotional, not tribal, not reckless, strategic. The 7-group open shop. Lucania built something radical. A multi-ethnic crime crew. Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Frank Costello, Joe Adonis, Vito Genovese, not families. A corporation. They robbed banks, controlled prostitution, ran gambling rings. And when Prohibition exploded, they stepped into bootlegging like businessmen entering a new market. Bootleg money, real power. Liquor turned gangsters into millionaires overnight. Lucania stopped thinking like a soldier. He began thinking like a CEO. He stayed away from street crimes and focused on planning, distribution, and logistics. Failure wasn't punished with death alone. Failure meant inefficiency. And inefficiency was unacceptable. Joe the Boss smiles like a knife. Masseria noticed the rising young strategist and pulled him into his empire. Lucania became his lieutenant. But loyalty inside organized crime is never permanent. It is leased. The Sicilian Caesar arrives. Maranzano entered America carrying the ambition of Julius Caesar. He saw himself not as a gangster, but as an emperor rebuilding Rome through the Mafia. And he saw Lucania as the future, or the obstacle. Handshake law. The Sicilian code was sacred. A handshake was a contract stronger than written law. When deals began collapsing between Masseria and Lucania, the betrayal was not just business, it was sacrilege. The Barbizon confrontation. A shipment of whiskey worth a fortune sparked the conflict. Masseria broke a handshake agreement. Lucania understood the message immediately. Independence would not be tolerated. War was approaching. Pick the winner. Lansky saw the storm before anyone else. The conflict between Masseria and Maranzano would explode into full war. And when it did, only one would survive. Lansky offered a third option. Eliminate both. Staten Island, after midnight. Lucania agreed to meet Maranzano alone at a dock on Staten Island. It was supposed to be negotiation. It became an execution attempt. The condition, Maranzano made a single demand. Lucania must personally murder Masseria. But Sicilian tradition held a secret rule. The man who personally kills a boss can never become one. Lucania refused. The pier with no witnesses. The refusal triggered torture. Lucania was beaten, hung by his wrists, burned, slashed. Maranzano tried to break him psychologically, not just physically. He failed. 55 stitches. Lucania survived. Barely. His face permanently scarred. His eye forever altered. The underworld whispered a new name. Lucky is born. Lucky Luciano. Not because he won, because he lived, and surviving meant something new inside his mind had formed. He would never be controlled again. The crash that changed everything. Then came 1929. Wall Street collapsed. America panicked. Crime changed overnight. Bootlegging profits dropped. Loan sharking exploded. Gambling surged. Luciano saw something revolutionary. Organized crime could dominate entire industries, legally and illegally. Pennies become millions. Small bets from desperate civilians turned into massive gambling syndicates. Luciano's empire expanded quietly while bosses obsessed over violence. He was building infrastructure. They were building graveyards. The poison money. Luciano rejected narcotics expansion, believing drugs attracted uncontrollable law enforcement attention. Instead, he expanded financial rackets. Crime was becoming banking, a war nobody could stop. The Castellammarese War erupted. Assassinations multiplied. Alliances shattered. New York became a battlefield. Luciano watched and waited, face to face by the rules. The assassination of Bronx boss Tom Reyna ignited full-scale conflict. Luciano orchestrated murders carefully, always obeying Mafia tradition. Violence had rules, and rules maintained order. Wednesday night in the Bronx. Reyna walked outside his aunt's house. He saw a familiar face. He smiled. Then Vito Genovese erased him with a shotgun blast. The boss's shadow falls. Luciano eliminated Masseria's bodyguard, Pietro Morello. Without protection, Masseria became vulnerable for the first time. The Bronx Zoo pact. Luciano met Maranzano again beneath the lion enclosure at the Bronx Zoo. They agreed to peace. They agreed Masseria must die. Coney Island, 3 hours of eating. April 15, 1931. Luciano took Masseria to lunch. Antipasto. Lobster. Wine. Coffee. 3 hours of celebration. 3 hours of distraction. A long leak. Luciano excused himself to the restaurant. He always said he needed to take a long one. That moment became history. The ace of diamonds. Gunmen burst into the restaurant. 20 shots. Masseria collapsed onto the table, still holding a playing card. The ace of diamonds. The symbol of a finished game. Less than a minute. The assassination took seconds. Luciano returned, called police, played innocent, and quietly stepped into power. The old man would have been proud. When Luciano asked how the hit went, Genovese smiled. The old man would have been proud. But the truth was darker. The old Mafia had died that afternoon, and something far more organized had taken its place.